Hello everyone. So today on the podcast we have Srinivas Sarkar. He has done his mechanical engineering from Pilani Dubai campus and currently he runs his own company called Coupl. And this year he was also in the Forbes 30 under 30 Asia list. So welcome Srinivas, great to have you on the podcast.
Very happy to be here. Oh, thank you.
So what is it that has been occupying your mind recently?
Honestly, it's there's always something occupying the mind when you're running an early stage startup. So there's always a new problem to solve, always something new to kind of work on. Over the last couple of months, we've just been working on our early growth and a fundraise in parallel, and a few other products that we're looking to launch. So that's been mostly in mind, and of course Forbes happened. So that's been pretty exciting for the last 2 months at least.
How does that feel?
It feels great because, to be very honest, when I was just starting off my journey of, I think before starting Coupl, when I joined Entrepreneur First, that's where I'd met in person for the first time somebody who was from the Forbes list. And that's when I was exposed to what this list meant. And I remember writing it down somewhere that would love to do it someday. I'm almost 30, so time was running out. So that was great to just make it right in time when I turned 29. And it obviously feels great. Very, very blessed for this to happen.
But was it something that you have very actively aspired of? Since you were aware of this?
Yeah, I think the aspiration was very active. Okay. The effort was not very active. The effort was, I think we realized early on, my co-founder and I, who were both on the list, that it is something that you become eligible for once you've done something tangible, right? Before that, we were, ideating a startup. We were working on kind of building the early stage of it. So we knew that the aspiration is active, but it doesn't make sense to even start working towards, say, the application and all of that. We realized only now that, hey, I think maybe it's meaningful. Maybe we've done something that we can at least show our faces and try to apply, right? As brutal as that sounds to us. So then when we decided in Jan 2024 that, I'm almost turning 30. This is a good time. We've got good growth. The company seems to be known enough. I think then let's actively try to, make it happen. And then it's a simple enough process. So we applied and we actively hoped that it happened.
Yeah, that's really great. So I would like to start with with your very beginning journey, your school days, etc.
Yeah.
But before going to that, I would like to know from you, what has coming in the Forbes 30 under 30 list changed inside yourself? So as in, I mean to ask, has it impacted your thought process or the way you used to look at yourself in any way, like anything internal changes you have observed in yourself?
Yeah, to be very candid, and I think this may not be very politically correct, but you do look at yourself a little better, right? You think that, this is something that you have looked up to for so many years. And one thing that happens is when it comes to you, you feel, okay, then there's some kind of achievement of some kind, some recognition that you've always wanted and has happened. So you feel good about yourself. Okay. But I think it's also human nature, which is very sad, which is, and I think this is true for any success in life, that when you think you've got it, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Because you yourself think that you're not such a special person. So if I got it, Forbes may not be that big a deal if I could get it. But that's just human nature. If I make $1 billion tomorrow, I may feel that making $1 billion is not a big deal. So that happens, but you do feel very, very honored by it and very glad to be in a community of such people, right, who are so diverse. And I must also add that, the other networks that we're a part of, like let's say BITSAA and YC, for example, it's pretty much business people. It's pretty much people who are working in business or tech. Whereas in Forbes, there's a whole cohort of people who are in arts and media, in social impact. So it's quite a diverse bunch, and you would like to be in a diverse bunch like that as well. Yeah.
So that's truly commendable, especially the self-awareness and the honesty with which you answered this question. Thank you so much for being so.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's dive into your school days. So we got to know that you were born in Bangalore only, and that too in Koramangala 3rd block. So tell us, did you always want to be an entrepreneur, or how did growing up in Bangalore impacted your schooling and your early years?
Yeah, so to clarify, I was born in Mumbai, but pretty much my formative years were in Bangalore. I moved here when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and when I was 7, I moved to Koramangala 3rd block. Or rather, my parents moved and I happened to move with them because I was a kid. But that did actually play a part. And more than Bangalore itself, it was Koramangala, particularly that really made a difference. Where I stayed, I was blessed enough to stay very close to this street where a lot of the Infosys founders were staying.
Oh, wow.
And now that's, I think, colloquially called Billionaires Row or Billionaires
Right,
Lane.
right.
Back then it was just called 13th Main. And we used to really appreciate kind of walking around there because it used to be a very green place, a lot of big houses. And even as a kid, you tend to question that, what does this guy do? Right? And you often hear that, okay, he's, Chris Gopal Krishnan, he's Andan Nilekani. They are the co-founders of Infosys. And you understand that, okay, what is Infosys? Okay, that's a business and it's a new business. It's not, say, as old as Microsoft. And you get to get exposed that, building a business can be a pretty fulfilling thing. Not just that it brings you money and a big house, but it's an interesting concept to learn about early on. So when I was 9, 10 itself, I was very exposed to these kind of people, what they do. And that definitely played a part in wanting to start up at some point and do something in the line of business.
Wow, that's truly something different, because I haven't spoken to many people who grew up in Coromandel.
Yeah.
That's a very, very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So do you remember if the school you went to, did they also conduct any kind of workshops or seminars related to entrepreneurship, from the very beginning? Or that culture came very later?
So I think you're right. It came very later. I think today, I'm not so exposed by what happens in schools today, but from what I hear, on and off sporadically, is that people are getting exposed to startups, to technology, to entrepreneurship as a concept, and even personal finance and all these things that are so critical, really, right? They're getting exposed to it early on in school. I think I was born at a time and I was in a school that was very traditional in that way. So we were, just work on your grades, try to not devote too much time in extracurricular as well, but work hard on your grades, try to land a good college, and then life is prima facie set from there, right? So I don't think I got the exposure from school per se, and I don't think anyone in my school or batch did, but we did, of course, have a lot of business people whose kids were in my school. So you get that exposure that, this person is a CEO at Texas Instruments, for example, or worked in tech in some kind, or had a startup. So we were exposed a little older on, I think 10th, 11th grade. And that was a little bit of exposure, but maybe not too much, maybe not as much as people get today.
Got it. Interesting. Was there also any particular event that you very vividly remember from your school days that perhaps was a major life-changing event for you? Or maybe it changed something at the level of your thinking very, very deeply?
No, I think one thing was that my schooling life was very much of a roller coaster, right? I think there was 10th grade, which was great, and I did, I think, pretty well. And then 11th grade was a big kind of jump down because you're balancing IIT coaching, and I'm sure the BITSAA watching can fully understand. So you're balancing IIT coaching, you're balancing school, and in CBSE, 10th to 11th is a leapfrog jump, right? So that was pretty hard as well. And I think failures teach you that, that to get used to failures, it's fine, that you can try something that's tough, and if you fail, it's okay, you just try harder again, right? And I've seen this pretty often with, I think, people in my school and people that I generally know, that people who've always succeeded from school, they get hit really hard in the real world, right? Whereas if you've gone through failure a little bit already, you're used to bouncing back. And that's kind of how it was for me as well. 10th was good, 11th was tough, then 12th you had to do well again. And then college itself was, first, second, third year, you're kind of chilling. Fourth year, you're bouncing back, getting your CGPA back up. And I think that journey was very formative of, changing how I look at taking risks and working hard. And that surely helped with everything that happened after college.
Very fascinating. So let's now dive directly into your BITS journey. So how were your 4 years at BITS Pilani? And if you were to share one major learning, which you had throughout the 4 years, what would that be?
Okay, one major learning is very difficult to pick, but I think resilience and diligence is what I ended up learning, but to be honest, quite late in that journey. I think when we entered college, the mindset was, you made it to BITS, life could be quite sorted now, right? Because that's what we learned as growing up, that you get into certain colleges in India or in the US or wherever, but those certain colleges, if you got into, you're pretty sorted for the rest of your life. And I had a very complacent attitude probably in the first 2 years, where I wanted to have fun, I wanted to play sports, I wanted to be very involved in extracurricular. But later on you realize that no, you need to not just be here, but you need to excel here in some way. And I think in third year is when I got very kind of active in doing both acads really well, as well as I could, and as well as doing extracurricular with a little more passion. So I think the overall lesson there that I learned, to answer your question, was just being very resilient and just doing much more than you thought you could. And
when you joined BITS Dubai,
Yeah.
so like, was there any clear objective in your mind? So for example, many people go with the ambition that I will secure a very good placement.
Yeah.
Some people go with the ambition that I will crack UPSC in my final year.
Yeah.
So was there any clear goal in your mind, or were you just trying to explore and learn new things in that time?
Yeah, so I think when I was in the 12th grade, the idea was that if you do mechanical engineering, it's a great foundation. You could do a master's, or you could work in a host of companies, non-tech mostly. And I think that would be a very fulfilling career. So I realized early on that that's a good aim to have. But I knew for sure that I would learn a lot more and have a lot more exposure when I was actually on campus. So, and that's what I got. I think first year itself, talking to seniors in their fourth year who have already offers from different type of industries, you get to know what are people really going after. Oh, people are very interested in investment banking. Why is that interesting? And you learn about that early on, and then you're able to form an opinion. So that's the exposure I got. And then I think my ambition or goal pretty much changed twice in college. The first was I really wanted to get into astrophysics. Okay. So my first internship I ever did was in the Indian Institute of Astrophysics in Bangalore. So that gave me obviously good exposure into that domain. And the idea was that after BITS, I would do a master's, I'd do a PhD, and I'd build a career in research or in ISRO or something along that line. That was the first one. And then the second one after that, I think when things changed as well, was that I would really want to do an MBA. And I think that is the one that really stuck very closely to me. Felt a passion towards getting into management. And that's what made me get into consulting right after college. So these were the two, I think, definitive objectives that I had from a career perspective when I joined college.
Okay. And what changed between wanting to become an astrophysicist and then doing an MBA or an entrepreneur? Like, what was the change that you mentioned?
Yeah, so this might be a long answer, but I'll jump into it, right? So I think essentially what happened was there was an interest towards astronomy when I was growing up as well, like when I was a kid. When I was in college, I realized that in my first year internship doesn't matter from my career perspective. It's not that if I want to do mechanical in the future, I can still do a passion internship in my first year. So that's why I did Indian Institute of Astrophysics. I saw that if it really made sense for me, then that would be my career. If it didn't, I have 3 more years to do internships that are more relevant to my future career. That was the thought process. At that time, we also had a very kind of inactive astronomy club in our college. So I realized that, I think it would be a great place to build a community and learn from each other about this career, see who else is interested in building a career in research, in astrophysics, in physics, and astronomy, and kind of take it from there. So I revived that club. I was the president for about 2 years in third year and fourth year. And I think the only third year president in college. But but I think what happened then was that I realized that it was such a deep passion of mine, and it gave me so much happiness that it didn't make sense to attach a salary to it, right? Amazing. That if I love photography, the minute I do it for a job, right, I may stop loving it. Because now there's a pressure to do it, right? And I think that works well with a lot of people where they should follow their passions. But for me, I realized that I don't want to ever resent astronomy. I want to keep it as a hobby for the rest of my life, right? So I realized a hard call, not too hard because I was not in a career like that, but I had to just change my direction there. And I realized that let me continue to have this as a hobby and work towards a different career. And I think by that time because of the upbringing in Koramangala, because of what I saw through school and college, I realized that a role in management and running my own company at some point makes a lot of sense. And what just made the most sense at that time was to build a great pre-MBA profile. And that's when I made the move to wanting to join consulting, and that's what I did after that.
Got it. Very interesting. So this exact thing that you said, that if you will allocate a monetary aspect to your passion, it might not be that fulfilling for you.
Absolutely.
So this is something I have heard a lot from artists. So like there have been a lot of artists who, when they were, let's say, just putting out content on YouTube or Instagram, they were very happy. The moment they made that to be their sole source of income, all the fulfillment and happiness just went away.
Makes sense.
Into
Yeah,
nowhere.
exactly.
Because like now there's a pressure of paying the bills on that particular hobby that they used to enjoy.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is very true. I mean, even though I was never in that position where I was doing a passion and making money from it, it was very clear and quite clear even from my internship days and from talking to people who do this as a full-time job, right? Like I spoke to some people at ISRO, so BITSAA who had done a postdoc in IISc and were now very storied engineers in ISRO. I saw that it was a job to them and their hobbies were now something else, right? And for most of them, it started off as a hobby. So it's great. I think it works really well for a lot of people. For me, I realized that that's probably not how it's going to fly for me. And my career is my career and my hobby is my hobby. And I make money separate from my hobby. So that's what the mindset was back then.
Very interesting. So there's this person called Cal Newport.
Okay.
You might have heard of it.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So he's a professor, if I'm not wrong, at the Northwestern University in USA.
Yeah.
So he makes a lot of content on YouTube. He has his own podcast as well. He's into writing books. So he has this concept that you should never make your passion your profession.
Okay.
Because the moment you will do it, all the joy and the juice you were getting out of it will start declining and diminishing over time.
Makes sense.
I kind of agree to that thought. So do you also think that all this, for the lack of a better word, this pursuit of converting our passion into profession, which people are behind these days, do you think people are maybe missing some point or not able to understand something clearly?
I think it's very subjective also on what the passion is, right? Okay. I think there are certain passions that are quite monetizable very directly. If I were to take the example of, say, somebody who is very good at graphic design, right? And graphic design is one of those things that it can be a very fulfilling hobby and it's also very easy to make your profession, right? And your profession could be very fulfilling if you're doing it. And also the profession should be done in a way where you can still enjoy it, which means probably doing it as a freelancer or doing it for a specific kind of a company or a cause or something like that. So then I think it can be easier. But I think when it's tough is when, let's say, photography. That's the best example that I've seen very often that is purely a hobby as it starts off with, and people try to use it as a way to monetize and make it a profession. And that's when you kind of lose your artistic inclination towards it, and it becomes a mechanical that I have to churn out 20 photos tomorrow, and I don't do it in the passion that I used to do it with. So I think it can be subjective like that.
Got it. Very interesting, and I really appreciate this self-awareness that you had at that point in time.
Oh yeah, I don't know how I did, but yeah. But yeah.
Okay, so if you were to share 3 things that you think you did right in college and that you did correct in college, what would those 3 things be?
I think being very outgoing, so wanting to do more than just acads or just chilling or just sports. I tried my best to be involved in extracurriculars, in taking up leadership roles in terms of either associations like the Astronomy Club or a TED conference that we did in college. So very actively doing that because it really builds great, I think, interpersonal leadership and diligent qualities, right? As a student, and very important. So I think that was one. The second was making friends very actively with senior people, right? So with your seniors, also with juniors, of course, but to be very outgoing because those contacts still help. There's a neobank founder from my college, Vishwajit. He used to run a company called Pencilton. So I think when I started Couple, the first kind of significant call I had was with him, and we used to kind of have chai together every afternoon. So it was very easy to reconnect and kind of get his point of view on what's the process to follow, how should I go about things. And I think the last one is to understand that while you're doing extracurricular, it's also important to be diligent on your acads, right? Because people try to be very extreme. They're either I want a 10 CGPA or I want to just make the most of my college life. But having that balance and understanding that at the right time. So I think maybe I did at the right time. I realized that, now I've done enough extracurricular. Let me spend the last 1.5 to 2 years on really making the acads fine again and doing really well. And yeah, I think those were the 3 kind of things I possibly did right during my 4 years there.
So this is very interesting, Srinivas. So when I was in BITS, so I observed 2 kind of people in my college, in my batchmate as well as in my seniors. One sort of people used to be the one, perhaps like you, who used to be good in academics, who are doing a lot of extracurriculars, who are there in 2-3 clubs, and who are doing everything. But their main problem was because we are doing everything and we don't know where possibly we should be putting our most attention and most energy into. We are confused at the end of third year or fourth year that what should now we be doing or we be going into. And then there was another category of people who were not able to do many things, maybe because they are not able to manage time, or they are just made to do one thing but perfectly. So their concern was because we haven't done anything, so what should now we be doing? So I think one of the main challenges that people in college in general also face, and especially in BITS because we have 0% attendance and that freedom, is of prioritization. That how much to take on our plate, how much to say no to. So if you could give advice on this line, how can one prioritize his or her time, especially in college?
So I think that's a tricky subject, really, right? I think people, when they are 40 years old also, they struggle with prioritization of time. So I think it's prioritization of, at that particular year, what is critical to do, right? In my fourth year, say final term, it would not have been critical to be excelling in all the events in college. What was critical is landing a good career, for example, right? Whereas in first year, and I've seen two approaches, like you said. One is the kind of people who realize that in first year, there's no career building happening. Let me enjoy my college life. Let me be exposed to student council activities and associations and really make the most of it. And they did that full on. And then there were the next set of people who said, let me kill my CGPA in the first year. Let me try to get 9.6, 9.8. So that next few years, I can do everything else. So you have to decide for you how it works, what in that year is most important, and everything else is extracurricular then. Which means sometimes it can be a case that in third year, your main priority is to be involved in, say, college events, right? Because you're trying to derive some kind of a learning experience there. Or these days, I think in third year, you realize that you want to build a startup. And that's your priority because you know that there's a great opportunity here. And that's your priority. And then you're just making sure your acads are not suffering. Because in a prior year, you worked on acads and your CGPA is high. And you can afford to spend time on exploring a startup or exploring something else. So just, I think every year that changes, and I think that changes throughout your life. When you're 50 also, it'll be different from when you're 51 or when you're 49. So that way, I think prioritization just purely depends on what your situation is, and realize that that year or that particular quarter or that particular day, what you need to focus on the most, and then kind of make everything second priority.
Got it. Absolutely makes sense. One of the challenges that I've also seen, especially in the last 2-3 years with college people, is, let's say a student is in his first year. So if he or she is not very clear on what he wants to do, they see it as a very bad thing, that I don't know what I want to do in life. And then there is another extreme. People are so very clear that they are very almost close to exploring new things. So I want to ask from you, how much clarity, now again this can be very subjective, but I want to know your thing, like how much clear you were when you joined BITSAA in first year, that what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and how did you prioritize, let's say, and you were not into astronomy before, I'm guessing.
So it was just a hobby.
It was a completely new thing for you. I can assume that. So how did you decide I should be devoting some time because it may become fruitful in terms of career, etc. So what were your clarity at that point in time?
So I think surely a lot of people in their first year don't have absolute clarity that this is where I want to end up after fourth year. They may have some basic direction that, I am a CS engineer and I therefore want to work in startups, right? I like that industry, or people are very clear that I want to go to the US for my masters. So when that clarity is there, that's a good anchor that that whatever you do, don't do things that make that plan, get that plan in trouble, right? That for sure if you only worked on, say, management clubs, right? But you were very clear that you want to do software engineering later. That can probably affect you because you're losing the opportunities on hackathons or doing things that affect this career, right? Positively affect that career. So I think having that anchor in place is good. And exploring is also good. So exploring and you're getting exposed to different things. And if at all something comes up that really changes your view, then that maybe the anchor also has to change. Maybe that long-term goal also can be in question. This is also something viable, something I may have more interest in. But typically if you're clear on something, make sure you're not doing something to very clearly deviate unless there's great intention that I'm deviating for a very clear reason, because I know that I want to do something else and not what I first thought I wanted to do. I think that's how I operated early on, and I think that's how I operate today as well. That that this is have some ultimate goal in mind, and if new things pop up, then explore it, and if it's worthwhile, then actually do it.
Very interesting. Okay, so after your 4 years at BITSAA, you graduated in 2018.
Yeah.
Okay, suppose that you joined EY as
That's
a
right.
consultant.
Yes.
So tell us about your journey. So you mentioned that you wanted to do MBA and that's why you went into consulting.
That's
so
right.
what changed during your 2 to 3 years tenure at EY that you got into entrepreneur first and Y Combinator and you eventually started your own startup? What was the major thing that happened during that time?
Oh yeah, so to be very honest, the major thing was COVID, right? Because I started doing my GMAT prep. So I had done about 2 years at EY, a very, very fulfilling job. I think I loved every minute of it, even though I worked 16 hours. Extremely fulfilling, extremely clear that, I'm getting great learning here, which will be great for an MBA and will be great in terms of, I knew I would add some value to my MBA class also. So I think there was nothing wrong with that plan. But what ended up happening was I started working on my GMAT sometime in Jan 2020.
Okay.
And in 2 months, there was COVID. So I was still working on GMAT. I actually had more time now because I wasn't traveling for work. So I could study more. And I was studying pretty actively. But then I realized that a lot of my friends who had gone to really storied colleges like, INSEAD and Harvard, they were in this situation where they were deferring their admissions or they were doing it online from India. And it just did not make sense to jump in right now. And there was also a major fear people had that what if COVID never goes? What if things get much worse? So it's better to stay put where you are, stay safe more than anything, and stay in a stable career if you have it, right? People are losing jobs as well. So I'm like, I had a job. Why don't I stay in this job? Because we don't know what's going on. Now, obviously, in the next few quarters, people realize that COVID will go at some point. But because I'd taken the call to defer the MBA application itself, I now had more time to explore other things. So that's where I actually started this plasma donation platform called Inara. And that was with my classmate from BITS. And our idea was people who are suffering from COVID and they're hospitalized, they typically need plasma. Hospitals can't arrange it. So let's create a platform where you can put a request for plasma. And if there's a COVID patient who is recovered from COVID, they can list as donors and we will make that connect on the website itself, right? You put in your blood group, you put in your city and we'll connect. So that was my first exposure to actually building something.
Wow.
And I realized that I like building and building is interesting and doing something that actually is used by someone is a very fulfilling way of life. So I did Inara for about a year.
You were doing it along with your job?
Along with my job. So my job used to kind of get over, I would say shut off for the day about 8:30 p.m. And I would chill for 10-15 minutes and then I would work on this. And it didn't seem like, oh, I'm such a hard worker or whatever. It was just out of passion I'm doing it and very happily doing it. Yeah. And the great thing was that because it was non-profit and because it was something that was actually helping people, looks like, we got a lot of volunteers. So we got a team of 40 people, which makes it really encourages you to keep working on it, right? So, we had people from all over the country who were volunteers, who were making calls, getting donor lists for us, having them kind of list on that platform. So overall building was really fulfilling. Did that for a year more till I think the ICMR changed the rule that plasma donation is now not allowed and hospitals should not prescribe it because there was a racket as well. Hospitals were charging $1 lakh for a plasma donation and you have to find a donor yourself. So I think for good reason or not, I guess they banned it. And we realized, okay, logically, this is a graceful ending to our project. So let's stop it. But it was 2021 odd and I realized that, hey, I still like building and I think this can be a good career to do this for profit, right? And for an actual startup or an actual business. And that's when I started working on a couple of ideas with about 3-4 batchmates of mine from BITS itself, and different co-founders working on different things. And that's what eventually landed me in Entrepreneur First, which is where I finally found my co-founder. So that was the brief journey, I think, from career to actually joining EF.
Very interesting. So I want to double click on one point that we mentioned a few minutes back.
Yeah.
So here when you were building Inara, all your bills and income was already taken care of through your EY job.
Yes.
So there was no pressure of earning a living on your
From Inara,
from
yeah.
Ahana.
That's right.
But when you started taking building a startup as your own career,
Yeah.
that must have came with that aspect as well.
Yeah.
So how was that different from taking the decision of not pursuing astrophysics because of the same reason that I don't want that fulfillment to go because of the financial burden?
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, great question, and I think great parallel as well. I think what was also happening that time was, if I take a few steps back, when I was in EY, and I can't name the clients very openly, but we had a Series J e-commerce startup that was a client of ours.
Okay.
So I used to work directly with the CEO and a few of the VPs and the CFO. So very exposed to the startup environment. So what that taught me was that startups seem to be the future. I love the culture here, and I love the fact that new innovation is actually happening, right? And would love to be a part of that in some way. Now, the logical thing was you're from consulting, so you join strategy, right? Or corporate development, or if you are a little more tech inclined, you join product. So I knew something I'll do there in some startup, but I would love to be in this space. Now, parallel May, I'm doing Inara, and that's been going fairly well till one day we stopped. So because of that exposure, and because of actually then knowing a lot of people in the startup world, including a lot of BITSAAs, I realized that building a startup is a viable career. If you were to do something that is, say, inherently profitable, or if you are to build something that is venture backable, then your day-to-day, I think, livelihood is taken care of by that company, right? So it was just about building something that is viable, either profitable or venture backable. And through a lot of iterations, I think I realized that if your mind is set to that, and it is something that you're going to build in a sustainable way, which means that you're not going to ditch your job and then look for ideas, but you're going to look for ideas, work on things, and when something is working out well, then you kind of jump ship and leave your job. Right. That was always the plan. So it was never going to be that I have to build savings because I'm going to do 1 year of soul searching or exploring. It was always about when there's something meaningful comes to my plate or something with deep PMF capabilities, then I'll probably leave my job. So that was very clear. And that's why the shift from doing Inara as a personal project for the country in some way to really doing a startup as a career, that shift became very clear that this is how that shift would look like.
Wow, this is truly amazing. Like one of the things that I can observe in your whole journey as a common denominator is that whenever you took a major decision or maybe any decision, you always spoke to a lot of people and got an understanding of how that world works.
Absolutely.
That's really amazing because you always had that data to base your confidence on. Many times, like even I find myself not being able to take a decision just because I don't have data, just because I haven't spoken to a lot of people, which I should have done.
That's really that always helps for sure. Yeah.
So now let's get into your journey at EF. So if you before diving into your journey, if you could explain to the audience in brief what is Entrepreneur First and what do they do, so like it would be really helpful.
Sure. So EF is a venture capital fund inherently. So that's what it's structured as. It's a VC fund, but they're a little different. What they do is they invest in your -1 to 0 journey. So they have cohorts every year across about 7 cities in the world. They select roughly 40 people every cohort. 20 are business people, or there's some people like me, right? So from a management kind of consulting background or domain experience background, and 20 are tech people. So they give you 3 months in that cohort to find a co-founder. So keep kind of speed dating co-founders in the cohort in a very incubation, environment. So keep working on ideas and you land up on obviously one co-founder. If you don't land up on a co-founder, then you can leave the cohort, that's fine. But if you land up on one, when you start working on your idea a little more seriously, and if you have great traction on that idea, or you have solid founder market fit, then they put the first pre-seed check into that business. And every batch, on average, I think they fund about 4 companies out of 20 teams. Well, that's 40 people, right? So that's how the cohort works. And because they're funding you in your -1 to 0 journey, they also give you a stipend for those 3 months. So you have some way of actually putting money behind the idea. Right. So if you have to travel to meet, say, a certain partner or a customer or work on some basic development, right? You can do that because you have some money that they've given you. So that's how EF works. And that just made a lot of sense for me because I was looking for a co-founder, and as you guessed, it made sense to be in a community of people who are also building the same thing and doing the same thing.
Correct. So when you were looking to get a co-founder for your company, for your business, did you have any specific requirements in your mind, like the person should be bringing these things and should be such and such a personality? Like, was there anything very specific in your mind?
Yeah, I think naturally, right? Because when I joined EF, the idea was not to let me join EF and let me get an idea. The idea was very clear. I had an idea. It was something in the insurtech space. I had just left a job from Plum, which is the group insurance company.
Yeah.
Great CXO team. But I realized that I think I'm better off at EF at that point. So I had an insurtech idea that I was working on, and I wanted somebody who is a full stack developer, a very talented engineer, and overall a problem solver, which I finally found in my co-founder. And the idea was to build the insurtech startup there.
Okay.
But obviously things changed, and I found much more conviction on the idea of a neobank for couples, and that's what ensued after that. But yeah, the requirements were very clear on who I'm looking for.
Very interesting. Okay, so Srinivas, tell us, what is Coupl? What is the problem you are solving, and how did you get the idea of starting such a company?
Sure. So Coupl is India's first neobank that's designed purely for couples. What we do as a one-liner is we offer couples the easiest way for them to manage their shared expenses using our digital joint account. The problem we're solving is, I think what we saw and what a lot of people can relate to is, for early married couples and live-in couples, managing shared expenses happens across multiple apps like Splitwise and WhatsApp groups, or happens across multiple bank accounts. So you are paying for certain things, she's paying for certain things, and you're tallying it and settling it and splitting it on a monthly or weekly basis. And this typically becomes a bit of a hassle. What you want is, you don't want to be the kind of couple that is, we need to do 50-50, or we have to have it in a certain kind of ratio. But it's more about, we need to have transparency, we need to have convenience, and we need to do it in a very logical way that's easy and fair for the both of us. Right? And when we spoke to about 200 couples, we realized that people have thought about this. They are not happy with the way the apps and tools they're using. They ideally want a joint account. But unfortunately, joint accounts are very tough to open in a lot of banks. You need to, one is physical process to open it, days to open. Typically, you need the same surname, same address, marriage certificate, and all these accounts have a very high minimum balance. So minimum balance makes sense if you're saving money there. Okay. But if you're putting money to spend it, why should you have to worry about, cannot go below 25K, I'll have a problem. Yeah. We saw all of this, we realized, let's make a better joint account. So we provide a joint wallet, like a Paytm wallet, with linked debit cards and that entire Bharat bill payment suite. So what couples do is, you set it up in 60 seconds. You can set it up with your flatmate, with your sibling also if you want to. But typically about 99% of our users are couples, and you put money into the account at the beginning of the month through an easy payment gateway. You use the cards to spend through the month, and you pay all your utility bills automatically using the Bharat bill payment stack. So water bill, gas bill, electricity bill, all of that. So it becomes this one bank account for your entire household. That's what we essentially do at Coupl.
Very interesting. In fact, today morning only, I was speaking to my flatmate, and I was telling that today I'm going to interview the founder of Coupl, and they are building such and such an app. And we came to the conclusion that as soon as we will be back, we will download Coupl, because right now we are managing all our expenses on Splitwise, and it's very difficult to record each and every transaction there.
It is. Yeah. And just to add, really, I have seen that Splitwise can work really well for flatmates. But typically what happens is, when you're in a couple, you don't want to have too much of this analysis going on, right? Yeah, you want it to be well-oiled, but you don't want it to be, tu ne ye nahi diya, or where's your 50% of this, all of that. So we see that with flatmates, it still could work. But with couples, you need something a little more elegant and a little less unromantic, so to speak, right? That's why.
Totally makes sense. Also, you mentioned a word which is neobank.
Yeah.
Could you please explain what a neobank is?
A neobank, in simple words, is a fintech company which does not hold its own banking license, but typically has deep customer insight on a certain market segment from a banking perspective. And they know what the market wants. They have the tech capabilities to build a solution for that market from a banking perspective, but they lack the banking license. So what the neobank or this fintech does is partner with a bank to have a license share agreement, and then offers the entire customer lifecycle management through a banking app. So a simple example would be, let's say us, right? we have deep customer insight on couples, how they operate. We know that if a account is created in this way with these features and these capabilities, we can actually solve a problem for them. But because we don't have a banking license, we can't store their money. So we partner with the bank so people can actually store money with us, which is secured with the RBI licensed bank. Okay. And we are managing the customers' day-to-day transactions, day-to-day management of money. And their money is also safely secured with the bank. So they have the security of a bank and the customer insight and kind of tech user experience of a startup. That's how it works.
Is it similar to an NBFC?
No, so an NBFC also is someone who partners with neobanks. Yeah. What an NBFC does is they also are a licensed, RBI licensed kind of player, and then they do either lending or investments, something like that.
Very interesting. So where do you see Coupl, let's say in the next 10 years? Like might sound like a very investor kind of a question. But like where do you want to build Coupl in the next, let's say a decade? What's your vision with it?
So the idea is that, the joint account which we currently operate, and it's gotten great organic usage. I think we've not spent anything on marketing so far and it's worked really well. So what we've realized is that this is a great go-to-market product, right? People get married or they move in together and immediately they have this issue of how do we manage expenses. Right. So we've been able to solve for that. But a couple's life, right? And LTV from an investor perspective, let's say LTV is very high for a couple. Couple's financial journey is also very long. There are a lot of life events that a couple goes through, all of which require money. Buying a house, traveling, having a kid. So we want to be a part of the couple's journey as they journey through life. So today their problem is expenses. Tomorrow it's going to be investments. It's going to be financing, which means loans. It could be credit cards as they move up the affluence curve. Mm-hmm. And we want to solve for them through every stage in a way that a bank has not been able to solve so far, which means understand their need very closely, build a product that's particularly solving that need and keep building on that. So finally, at the end of 10 years, what we will end up with is a great family finance product where you have a joint account, you have investments, you have a credit line, as well as a host of other problems that we uncover that couples face and just build for that.
Wow, that sounds really like a go-to destination for every couple to manage their finances.
For your family, exactly.
Yeah. Very interesting. What has been the biggest challenge you have faced till now in the journey of building Coupl?
I think there's so many challenges, it's tough to kind of tell, right? I think every quarter there's a new big challenge. Oh. When we started off, the biggest challenge was having a bank actually partner with us, right? Because it's pretty much like an investor pitch, but it's a little more on the numbers part, right? Because for a bank, it's mostly not so much about, hey, your pedigree can be this, your experience can be this, and all this helps. But what they want is ki dhanda kitna hoga, right? If I partner with you and I put my technology or engineering bandwidth, and they have small engineering bandwidth, right? Because they're not tech companies. So if we put XYZ engineers to deploying this partnership, right? How much ROI will we get from it? What's the deposit you're estimating, transaction volume, all of that. So convincing a bank that one, this use case exists because they say that, we have a joint account. Why is that not enough, right? What is something new you're adding? So convincing them of that, convincing them that because of this use case, volumes will be high and the market is huge. I think that was the first big challenge. After that was obviously fundraising because consumer fintech requires a lot of early capital. Yeah. I think what's often said in business is that I think 90% of your problems can be solved with sales. Right? I think that's true for e-commerce, that's true for SaaS, that's true for traditional businesses. But in consumer fintech, you still need capital, right? Yeah, early on. So getting capital to really build this out was the next challenge. And then the ongoing challenge for us, of course, is keeping tab of the regulatory environment, right? How regulations change for the worse sometimes or change for the better, and you better tap into that opportunity before the other person does, or that they're going to change for the worse, and how do you manage to keep your business afloat? So maintaining relations with people in NPCI, RBI, staying close to where the action is, I think that's an ongoing challenge that we have to keep kind of facing.
Interesting. Coming on to your bank's point.
Yeah.
So do you think, was it more difficult to convince them that such a thing could be deployed, or was it more difficult to get a meeting with them in the initial place because you are a very new company?
Oh yeah.
What was more difficult?
So to be very honest, the first few bank meetings I got because of a few posts I put on bitchins for each other on Facebook. So there's a guy from RBL who was a Goa grad who connected me to somebody who was senior up, and I think 3 or 4 meetings were through the BITS network. Incidentally, right? After that, I think what really helped was, the background kind of helps, right? That you're from known colleges, worked in known industries. People think that, this guy can't be utterly crazy, right? He probably has something in mind. After the meeting, they may think that, okay, this guy's out of his mind, but they may take the meeting still. So I think getting meetings was not as difficult as we imagined first. It was easy on, but closing that was, of course, its own challenge, and rightfully so. Banks want to understand fully before they accept it.
Got it. Very interesting. Now we are almost at the end of the podcast.
Sure.
It has been really amazing talking to you.
Likewise.
Really insightful. I want to know how does building a startup change you as a person? Like, how was Srinivas, who had just started with EF, different from Srinivas, who is currently building Coupl, and with whom I am having this podcast with? What's the major difference?
Oh my God, I think so many differences, to be very honest, right? And especially the early leg of the company really is what changes you, because I think from before being a founder to being an early stage, entrepreneur, I think that change is much deeper than early stage to, say, an IPO'd entrepreneur. So, I believe the largest thing which was there early on also, which was taking ownership, it just took that to a whole new level, right? And also learning that taking ownership, not just about work and in business, but having that attitude of being an owner, that the work I do is important regardless of my shareholding. And I'd heard this some time back, that entrepreneurial spirit and ownership is not about actual shareholding, right? I could work at a company and be 1 out of 1,000 employees and still have a fulfilling ownership attitude than maybe being a 50% owner in a startup. So I think that taught me something which I extend to my personal life as well, that it is someone who is ill in the family, someone who needs some help in the family, or a neighbor who needs some support, or just giving advice to, say, a junior at BITS. I try to be a very ownership first attitude, be someone who helps, be someone who can actually be relied on, right? I think that's what being a founder kind of taught me, because early on, your investors rely on you because you're early stage, your employees rely on you, and overall people think that, if something goes wrong, well, he knows what to do, right? Because obviously you go to your boss, right, first.
Correct.
So that attitude, and oftentimes you don't know what to do. So you have to develop that attitude and be a very problem solver for anything in your life. So I think that's what it really kind of taught me, at least in the last 2 years.
Amazing. And what do you think is the most difficult part of being a founder?
I think that you don't have anyone else to go to, right? That if there's a problem, you can't really have someone who you can defer it to. But I think, sure, if you're a founder, maybe if you're a BITSAA founder, you'll have a great network around your founders who've probably been through a similar journey or have been through similar problems, and you can probably consult them, and they can surely help you in some way. But the buck stops at you, right? If there's a problem that has to be solved, you can consult people, but you have to solve it. So I think that's largely the challenge of actually being in this job. And it's a challenge that you kind of just adapt to and get used to, that now you no more miss that you need to go to someone else to help you out. But you know that whatever happens, you'll figure it out, because why will you not figure it out? You have to go.
But was it difficult in the initial when you started to switch to this mindset? Because you come from a full-time job background.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe for most people that shouldn't be difficult, because when you leave a full-time job to be an entrepreneur, you are very starry-eyed, right? You have no view of what the problems could be. So anything is like, the opportunity to do something, right? Okay, the bank is not listening, but hey, that's part of the startup journey. I'm going to talk to 10 more. I think fatigue kind of hits you 2-3 years down the line when you're like, it's a tiring journey, and now I don't want this to break again. I don't want this problem again. But when you're early on, I think you're very starry-eyed. So you want to go ahead and solve whatever problem that comes your way. I think that was the same case for me. Okay. And even in my job at EY, I couldn't just go to the manager with a problem. I had to go to him with a solution as well. Yeah. So that was the attitude that kind of stayed on.
Very interesting. Okay, so thank you so much, Srinivas. It was really insightful talking to you.
Absolutely.
Any last piece of message or advice you would like to give to the viewers or viewing this podcast?
So the viewers are BITSians, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think you're part of a great community, and I think the BITSAA community is doing a fantastic job in connecting us further. And if there's anything that the community can do for you, myself included, please feel free to reach out. I think that's what this whole network of bits is about. Be it anything from YC to Forbes to being in fintech or even consulting, would be more than happy to help the network in any way I can.
Okay. Thank you, Srinivas. Thank you for
Awesome. Fantastic.